Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today's tutorial is a quick and easy scoop neck crop top, ready for your next day at the boardwalk or nightcap on the beach. Speaking of, if you're interested in finding more beach-ready makes or maybe something else to tickle your fancy, you're in the right place. We have hundreds of crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category of 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 250 grams of yarn. That's 555 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order. And into this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you'd rather attend a barbecue or a pool party. Considering how much I love barbecue food and that I can't swim, I'd say barbecue. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and double crochet. This pattern's made for a size small. We can't adjust it for our size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook, and we're all going to start by making an even number chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to our underbust, so roughly where an underwire would lay. I need roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 24. Now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first lemon peel stitch row. Start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a single crochet. So pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Then the next stitch is going to be 1 double crochet. So yarn over, into that next chain, we're going to pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then we're going to continue to alternate between a single and a double crochet to reach the end of the row. Once more into that following chain, insert with a single, following chain, insert with a double crochet, and I'll meet you back at the end of the row. We made our way down with our row 1. Now our row 2 is going to be a repeat of this. So simply chain 1, that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, flip our work, then just continue to alternate between a single and a double crochet into every stitch. Now just as a really quick tip, we aren't doing any increases or decreases, so we should still have the same amount of stitches as chains that we made. And also all the stitches that we have should be staggered from the previous row stitch to get the texture that we want. So as an example, if we're working a single crochet into a stitch, the stitch right underneath should be a double crochet and vice versa. We are back and our row 2 is completed. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat this row until we all have a total of 4 rows. Then I'll meet you back so we can do our decrease row together. We are back and our first 4 rows are complete. Now we're going to get started on our first decrease row. So what we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work. Do our lemon peel stitch all the way down per usual, leaving the last 3 stitches. So we've made our way all the way down with our row 5, leaving the last 1, 2, 3 stitches. Now we're going to close off this row with a decrease of 3 double crochets. So yarn over, into that third to last, pull through. Second to last, pull through, and last, pull through. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. So from here, yarn over, pull through the first 4 loops, leaving us with 2 loops. Then yarn over, pull through 2. And we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the edge of this row just so we know where we're decreasing. Now that this decrease row is complete, we should have 2 less stitches than our previous row. So since everyone's row 5 is complete, that stitch marker edge is going to be the bottom of our piece. Then from here, we're just going to continue to do our same lemon peel stitch rows. So as a refresher, chain 1, flip our work. Start with 1 single crochet into the first stitch, 1 double crochet into the next, and then alternate to reach the end of the row. Then all we're going to do is do 3 non-decrease rows, then a decrease row the same way that we just did this one. Now we're going to want to repeat these rows until we have a portion that can reach from mid underarm, placing this first row right at mid underarm, over to the front of our body, so roughly where a bra strap or tank top strap would lay. And just as a really quick tip, the decrease end is going to be along the bottom so far, so I would recommend to insert a stitch marker into the edge of every decrease row, because we are going to do some decreases along the top as well, so you'd want to make sure that you know which one's which. And I'll meet you back in rows that are in multiples of 4 minus 1. We are back and my underarm portion is complete. Now I have a total of 11 rows, remembering that the amount of rows that we needed was in multiples of 4 minus 1, and my width is roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters. Now from here we're going to continue on with the decreases that we have along the bottom per usual, but now we're going to decrease along the same decrease row along the top for our neckline as well. So since we should all be along the top, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now for this portion of our piece, our decrease rows are now going to start and end with a decrease. So to get started with this one, we're going to insert, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over and pull through all 4 for our decrease of 3 single crochets. Now from here, our following stitch for everyone is going to be 1 double crochet, then do our normal lemon peel stitch. So 1 single, 1 double into every stitch, since we're closing off the row with a decrease, leaving the last 3 stitches, and I'll meet you back. So we've made our way down with our first decrease row, and into the last 3 stitches, we're going to do a decrease of 3 double crochets, pretty much the same way that we've been doing this entire time. So yarn over into that next available stitch, pull through, second to last, pull through, last, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4, yarn over, pull through 2. Now this decrease row, which I will be inserting a stitch marker into the top and into the bottom, should have 4 less stitches than our previous row. So our first decrease row that starts and ends with a decrease is completed. Now from here, we're still going to have the same sequence as our previous sections. So 3 lemon peel non-increase, non-decrease rows, then that following row, start and end the row off with a decrease the same way that we just did together. We're going to continue to repeat those 4 rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid underarm over to the side of the base of our neck. Then I'll meet you back when we have rows in multiples of 4. We are back. We have just completed the neckline decrease portion. I have a total of 16 rows and my width is roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters. Now what we're going to do from here is we aren't going to do the decreases at the tops of our decrease rows anymore, but we are still going to maintain the decreases along the bottom until we reach the center of our chest. So since we already know how to do this, just to talk you guys through, we all should have ended right after a decrease row. So the following 3 rows will be lemon peel stitch rows with no increases, no decreases. That following row will end with a decrease of 3 double crochets, then continue to repeat those 4 rows until we have a portion that can reach mid-chest, and I'll meet you back when we have rows that are in multiples of 4. So we are back. The entirety of the first half of my front panel is complete. I have a total of 24 rows. My width is roughly 8 inches or 20 centimeters. Now what we're all going to do from here is our middle row. Now everyone's middle row will not have any increases or decreases. So from where we're at, chain 1, flip our work. Do our same lemon peel stitch all the way down, then I'll meet you back at the end of that row. We are back and our middle row is complete. Now before we get started on the following row, we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the bottom of that middle row just so we know where that's at for the bottom band. Now what we're all going to do from here is, since we should all be along the top, chain 1, flip our work. Do our same lemon peel stitches all the way down, leaving that last stitch, and I'll meet you back so that we can all do our increase together. So we are back. We have just made our way all the way down with our following row, leaving that last stitch. Now we're going to do an increase because we need to mirror everything we did on this side of our middle row. So our increase is going to be pretty simple. All it's going to be is 3 double crochets all into that last stitch. So into that last stitch, insert with 1 double, same last stitch with a second, and same last stitch with a third. Now that we have our increase, we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the edge of this row as well. And once we have that increase row, we're now going to do 3 lemon peel stitch rows with no increases and no decreases. Then all we're going to do is continue to repeat those 4 rows, which is basically mirroring everything that we have here on this side of our middle row, for the same amount of rows that we have for this portion of our front panel. So once we have the same amount of rows, I will meet you guys back so that we can then do the increases on both ends. We are back. We have just completed this side of our front panel. Now we're going to repeat this side. So now we're going to be doing increases along both ends for the same amount of rows that we have for this side of our front panel. So since we should all be along the top, we're going to start our following row off with an increase of 3 single crochets, so chain 1 and flip. Then start with 3 single crochets all into that first stitch. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. I do like to insert my stitch markers into my increases. Then our following stitch is going to be a double crochet. Then continue with 1 single, 1 double into every stitch. And just like how we did on the other side where we decreased on both ends, we're now going to be increasing on both ends for this portion. So once we have 1 stitch left, into that last stitch do an increase of 3 double crochets and I'll meet you back. So we are back. We've made our way all the way down with our first increase row where we increase along both the top and the bottom. Then we're going to do 3 lemon peel stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, and then this same increase row for the same amount of rows that we have for this portion of our front panel. Once we have the same amount of rows, I will meet you guys back, then we can finish up with the rest of our front panel. So we are back. This portion of our front panel is complete. I have a total of roughly 11.5 inches or 29 centimeters. Now from here we're going to close this off by mirroring this side of our front panel, but instead of the decreases, we're still going to be doing increases. So since we all should have ended right after our increase row, the following 3 rows will be our lemon peel stitch rows. Then the following row will be, again, our lemon peel stitch row that ends with an increase of 3 double crochet. And that's it. Continue to repeat those 4 rows until we have the same amount of rows as this portion over here. Once we have that, do a chain up 1 and cut. We are back. I've just completed the entirety of my front panel. Now I have a total of 49 rows and my total width is roughly 14 inches or 36 centimeters. Now what we're going to do from here is our back panel. Now the back panel is going to be super duper simple. I have already completed my back panel and have seamed one side, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. For the back panel, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we made for the front panel. Then just do our lemon peel stitch rows with absolutely no increases and no decreases until we have a portion that can stretch from mid underarm around our back to mid underarm. Then once we have that completed, I'll meet you guys back to seam it all together. So just to let you guys know, I have a total of 39 rows. My width is roughly 12 inches or 30 centimeters for my back panel. Now we're going to seam it up. So what we're going to do is place our front panel on top of our back panel, then insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back. Then we're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure it. Now we're going to do a single crochet seam. So start by inserting our hook into that first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet everything together. Once more, first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet everything together, and we're just going to continue doing that till we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut and repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed up, the next thing we're going to do is get started on the bottom band. We're all going to start with a single crochet row, which is our prep row. So we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, making sure that all the seams are now on the inside. Then insert your hook into any side row along the bottom. We are going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. Now I've already taken out my stitch markers along the bottom, except for the middle one. That one still needs to stay in place. So reaching over into our following side row, which is the first side row within the front panel, we're going to start by finding that first side row and insert, starting with just 1 single crochet. Now this is my next side row. That's going to be 2 single crochets into that top loop. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second. And that's it. Once more, my next side row is this one. Find that top loop and insert with just 1. My next top loop, find that and insert with 2. Now we're going to continue to do this, making our way all the way across the bottom of our front panel. But once we reach our middle row, make sure we're inserting our stitch marker into there. Then I'll meet you guys back once we make our way all the way around and slip stitch into that chain space. Now as one really quick tip, the single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So when it's completed, try your piece on. If it's a little bit too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. So we are back. Our single crochet row is complete. Now we're going to get started on the bottom band. So first things first, we're all going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and the single crochet row that we just completed is now faced away from us. Then we're all going to start by inserting our hook into any even numbered stitch away from our front panel's stitch marker stitch on the right side, the width that we'd like for the bottom band to be. So including my stitch marker stitch, I inserted my stitch marker into the 10th stitch away. So counting this out together, starting with our stitch marker stitch, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I inserted my hook only in through that front loop. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook and do a slip stitch row until we reach our stitch marker. We're all going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, and now we're going to start with our slip stitches, starting with that same stitch that our chain 1's in. So this first one might be a little difficult, but we're just going to insert, then yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. Then into that following stitch, working in towards our stitch marker stitch, we're going to insert into that front loop only. Then yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. We want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise that following row will be too tight to work into. We do want to make sure that we're also only working in through the front loops so that we have stitches to work into and make our way all the way around. Now I've made my way down with my first row. We are going to need to connect it into the base, and the base are going to be all the stitches on the left side of my stitch marker. So making sure we're slip stitching into that front loop, we're going to find that next available stitch, insert into that front loop only with a slip stitch. Now this stitch seems like another slip stitch that we just did, but this is actually just to connect. Then once we have that, we do need to work our way up to the following row, so slip stitch into that following stitch into the base's front loop. Then once we have those 2 slip stitches, which don't actually count as a stitch, those are just to connect, we're going to flip our work. Then from here on out, we're going to be working within the back loops. So finding that first stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to find that back loop, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. Again, next stitch is back loop, insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and that's it. Continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We are back, and we have just completed our first 3 rows. Now we're just going to connect it into the base together once more. So the same way that we did the previous row, find that next available stitch into the base and insert only in through that front loop, yarn over and pull through everything. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then into that next available stitch into the base, insert into that front loop as well. Still doesn't count as a stitch, flip our work, and repeat. So continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and just continue to repeat those 2 previous rows, making our way all the way around. And once we're worked into this last stitch right before our first row, I'll meet you guys back. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows, and we're now worked into the stitch that's right before our first slip stitch row. What we're going to do from here is just continue to do our back loop slip stitch rows the same way that we've been doing this entire time, but working in through those available stitches that we have behind our first row. We're just going to continue doing that until we're worked into our stitch marker stitch, and then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We made our way all the way down, working into those available back loops, and we're worked into our stitch marker stitch. Now, just as a really quick tip, if some of you guys ended along the outer edge, all you're going to do is chain 1, flip your work, and then do 1 more back loop slip stitch row and connect it back into that stitch marker stitch. That's only so that we can all end within the stitch marker stitch, so the seam was going to be a little bit easier for everyone. But once when we are worked into the base, what we're going to do is seam this last row to those available stitches that we left for ourselves when we're working into the front loops, when we're working into the first few rows for the bottom band. So we're all going to make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out, meaning the seams that we have for the sides are now along the outside. Then we're going to insert our hook into that first available stitch into the bottom band, then into that first available stitch that we have into the base. I'm going to take out my stitch marker because we don't really need it anymore. And I'm going to find that first available stitch into the base, which are these available stitches that we have right here. Going to insert my hook in through there with a single crochet. Let's do that again into that next available stitch into the bottom band, insert, next available stitch into the base, insert with a single crochet, and that's it. We're just going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut. So we are back. We have just completed the entirety of our bottom band. Now we're going to get started on our sleeve, but the sleeve is going to be fairly simple, so I'm actually just going to talk you guys through it. So we're all going to start by making an even number chain, the height that we'd like for the sleeve to be, keeping in mind that it is going to scrunch because it is going to be a puff sleeve and there is going to be a bottom band as well. Now, I did want mine to be roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 24. Then from here, all I did was lemon peel stitch rows. We aren't going to have any increases or decreases, so it's just going to be a solid panel. And we're going to make sure that we're doing it for a certain amount of rows. So what we're all going to want to do is make a prep chain. So all we would do is just make an even number chain using our same 5mm hook that can wrap around our bicep. Now I already went ahead and measured mine out. I needed roughly 44 chains. And the amount of rows that we're going to do for our sleeve is going to be the same amount of chains that we made plus that half. So as an example, since I made a chain 44, we're going to cut 44 in half, which is 22, then add the chain number with that half, so 44 plus 22. So I went ahead and made 66 rows. And once we have that, I will meet you guys back so we can seam it together and get started on the cuff. So we are back. Once we have the entirety of our sleeve width completed, we are now going to seam it together. But just to remind you guys, I made a total of 66 rows and my total length was roughly 18 inches or 46 centimeters. All we're going to do is fold our work in half, then insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to do the same single crochet seam that we did for the body. So we're just going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and just to do the first one, find that first stitch from the front panel, insert, first stitch from the back panel, insert with a single crochet, and continue this, making our way all the way down, and then I'll meet you back at the end of the row. So we have just completed seaming our sleeve. Now we're going to get started on the cuff. So we're all going to start by flipping our work right side out, so the seam is all along the inside. We're all going to chain 1. Then what we're going to do is 1 single crochet into the next side row, then a decrease of 2 single crochets. So getting this started, finding our first side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and start with just 1 single crochet. Then find my next side row, find that top loop. This is my next side row. That's that top loop. We're going to insert and pull through, and also insert pull through into our following side row. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Let's do this again. This is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1. Then into my following 2 side rows, a decrease. So into that next top loop, pull through, next top loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around. Now as a really quick tip, the amount of stitches that we're doing should be the same amount of chains that we made when we measured around our bicep. And also this single crochet row will be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once when it's completed, try your piece on. If it's a little bit too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. So now that our single crochet row is complete, we're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the cuff to be. I'd like for my cuff to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 5. Now that we have our chain, just like how we did for the bottom band, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1, and put 1 slip stitch into every chain. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch and continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now that we've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we did for the bottom band, but now it doesn't need to be within the front loops. So just find that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch, that's to connect. To work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, still doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. From here, continue to repeat our back loop slip stitch rows, connecting it into the base the same way that we just did, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left, I will meet you back. We are back and we've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. Now we're going to seam it together. Now the seam that we're going to do for this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then yarn over, pull through everything, and finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop. First stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over and gently pull through all 3 of those loops. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and continue doing this till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so we are back. We have just completed seaming up our cuff. Now from here we're going to single crochet across the top of our sleeve then repeat, making a second one that is exactly the same. Now as you guys can see, I went ahead and already did my single crochet row along the top. It is going to be done exactly the same way as the single crochet row right before we got started on the length of our cuff, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. We're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning the seam that we have for the sleeve is along the inside. Then insert our hook into any one of the side rows along the top. Then we're going to put one single crochet into one side row, then a decrease of 2 single crochet into the following 2. We're going to continue that, making our way all the way around. Just as a really quick tip, we should end up with the same amount of stitches as prep chains that we made when we made that chain that wrapped around our bicep. Once we have that, like I said, make a second sleeve that is exactly the same, and then I will meet you guys back. So now that both of our sleeves are complete, we're going to have to do a single crochet row on top of our body panel, and then we can seam everything together. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the top of our body panel. Then just like the single crochet row that we did along the bottom, we are going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochet into every side row. Again, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch, so once when it's completed, try your piece on. Just make sure that everything is fitting nicely. If it's a little bit too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. Then once when this single crochet row is complete, mine's already completed as you guys can see, we're going to want to try our piece on. Then we're all going to want to insert our stitch markers into the stitches that we have that's in the front and within the back of our arm. So when we try the piece on, we are going to want to make sure that it's sitting exactly where you want it to sit once when it's completed, and that it's centered with the center of our chest. So basically everything should be sitting perfectly. Then go ahead and insert stitch markers into the stitches that you have that's nearest to the corner of our underarm within the front, and into the stitch that's nearest to the corner of our underarm within the back. But once we have it into one side, we are going to want to do the same thing on the other side, making sure that we have the same amount of stitches from stitch marker to stitch marker. Now for those of you that have my numbers, I have 15 stitches in between my stitch markers, and now we can seam up our sleeves to the body. So seaming up the sleeves is going to be fairly easy. What I'm going to do is align my tail end of my single crochet row that we just completed within the sleeve with the stitch marker that's nearest to the back panel. Then we're just going to do a single crochet seam until we reach our following stitch marker. So what I mean by that is I'm going to take my tail end within the top of my sleeve. I'm going to insert my hook in through that stitch, then also insert my hook into that stitch marker that I have within the body that's nearest to the back panel. Then we're going to do a single crochet seam until we reach our following stitch marker. So my hook is already in through both the sleeve and the body. I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then just finding that next available stitch into the sleeve, I'm going to insert my hook. Next available stitch into the body, insert my hook in through there, and single crochet everything together. So the same seam that we did for the sleeve and the body. Just continue doing this until we reach our following stitch marker stitch, then repeat on the other side. We are back. Everything is all set up and seamed into place. Now we're going to do our top band. Now the top band is going to be done exactly the same way as our cuff, so I'm actually just going to talk you guys through it. So making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, all we're going to do is insert our hook into any one of the stitches that we have along the top, then start by making a chain the height that we'd like for the top band to be. I like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making chain 5, then just do the same back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way across our body, over the sleeves, and back around. We don't have any more stitches left to work into. I'll meet you back so we can seam it together. So now that we have made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows, we are all done. Now, the last thing I have to do is just seam it together, and the seam is going to be done exactly the same way as the cuff. So I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitches of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to do the same outside loop slip stitch seam that we did for the cuff. When we have that completed, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then we are completed. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. There you have it. Hope y'all enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!